Director General. You hold this position since July 2022. You have a career history that is so rich, it helps you embracing many positions in the French Air and now Space Forces. First to mention for the people who are coming into our room, you are still an engineer at the École Polytechnique, and you joined the French Air Force first as a fighter pilot. You've also had responsibility in trainings. You partook to operations in the Balkans, took responsibility within the French Flight Test Center. You also joined the capability of the Air Force staff in Paris, commissioned the ASMPA nuclear weapon system, took part in the NATO international military stuff in Brussels. You were in 2013 a deputy director of the Euro-Atlantic branch at the French delegation for strategic affairs. You commanded also the Balkan operation within the Joint Air Force component. And now you have this current position. And I will leave the floor to you and take over later on for the questions.
Thank you very much. Very nice introduction. Thank you very much to CYSAT for inviting me to give a few remarks this afternoon. I know the second challenge for me, well, first is obviously to address such a distinguished audience. And the second one is to address you, or to address this audience just after lunch. So I have to keep it entertaining, of course. And my challenge will be to keep you awake through those remarks. Of course, my point as a space commander here is to talk about defense. Here we are talking about space and cyber defense, but not a word about space defense, but in fact everything is connected. And the first thing that connects those two domains, as we call them now, cyber and space, is that they are all strategic and they are a real infrastructure for us for the future, but not only for the military, of course, for all of us as human beings or inhabitants of Earth. Of course, we will use space and digital networks in the future. We need to consider the security of a very critical infrastructure. Space is useful for all kind of economical activities, of course. You see them behind me, of course. It's very often underestimated. You are probably, all of you know that you are using space every day, probably 20 times a day in all of your activities, just watching TV, looking at the weather forecast and such things, or just driving your car. That's the best example that we have, of course, is GPS and PNT. Positioning on Earth is quite useful when you can do it automatically and without, pulling out a map that could be edited, without trying to find your way on map. The device tells you where you are. But the other thing that is very useful with this positioning constellation is timing, of course, and the time reference provided by the GPS constellation and other positioning constellation is critical to many sectors, including the digital network sectors for synchronization of many activities, energy production, for example, energy that doesn't appear on the slide, by the way. Is also very important to all of us for the comfort of our lives, for the security of our activities. It's realizing that maybe we had some vulnerabilities that were not completely covered in space, and because space until the end of the 2010 decade was considered as a domain for peaceful activities. It's probably no longer now. So we need to consider that and cover our responsibilities and protect our interests in space as well. And that's what the French government expressed with a space defense strategy, and that led to the creation of a space command in the armed forces. So it's been placed in the Air Force, which is now Air and Space Force, by the way. And I'm responsible of covering space activities for the armed forces. My mission is to make sure that those space services are available for the other domains, for their own activities and military operations. But of course, if I want to make sure that those services are available, I have also to protect and defend and make sure that I can cover all types of aggressions or threats in space. well, I should go to the next slide. This is it. I want to continue on the parallel between cyber and space. Again, two very critical domains. Now we call them operational domains because we expect the war to extend to those domains. And if we go to military operations, we need to operate in space as well as in cyber domains. What's common between cyber and space is that there are very nice playgrounds for what we call hybrid strategies. And those hybrid strategies are basically what allows one of your opponents, adversary, enemy, to operate below the threshold of real aggression to gain some advantage. So it's not necessarily not legitimate. If it's considered in a gray zone, of course, it's not completely legitimate, but its status is unclear. And what is clear on the similarity between cyber and space, it's very, very difficult to attribute action. So if you see something happening in space, the first thing you have to do is who did it? And it's pretty difficult to attribute that any kind of action to anybody in space and in cyber, as you know, because those domains are completely open. They are considered without any borders, of course. They cross borders, and in space there are no borders. And also it's the place where everybody is operating together, military and civilians, national and foreign. And it's very, very difficult to sort out who is doing what. It has been sort of clarified for space a long time ago, 1967, with the Outer Space Treaty. But the clarification that was good at that time is probably not sufficient right now. So this treaty defined space as a free for access for everybody. Everybody that could go to space was allowed to operate in space, of course. It was seen as a global common. It's probably the same as digital networks nowadays. So there's no borders, no territory. You can operate and fly everywhere. You overfly other territories, not only national territories, of course, because you have to circulate pretty quickly around the Earth to be able to stay up there, of course. Of course, there is no sovereignty. The Space Treaty extends to celestial bodies. And of course, it also says that you are not allowed to claim sovereignty on a celestial body or to establish any permanent military basing, of course. With that, thank you very much. With that, of course, that is all we have, in fact, in terms of legal framework for space. It's pretty liberal, as you see it. So the difficult thing now is, as I said, to understand what is an abnormal behavior and to attribute it and to react to it if necessary. But what is an abnormal behavior when the rules are so lax and so permissive? So that's a difficulty we have right now, and that's a difficulty that exists also in the cyber domain, of course. And if you detect an anomaly, you know who did it. Now, how do you qualify it as a potential aggression or at least a suspect maneuver? Well, that's all the difficulty, of course. So the impunity for the operators is also a difficulty we have to face. That makes it a gray zone where you can drift without anybody noticing from the competition, which is normal, to contestation, okay, when you try to get undue advantage over your competitors. And of course, we don't want to drift into a conflict, of course, but the gray zone advantage is that normally you can stay below the threshold of conflict, still pushing your advantages or increasing these advantages for your adversaries and competitors. So with that, of course, modern technologies and the free access to space, of course, make it possible for many, many users to do what they want in space. And with what they want is also some behaviors that are becoming problematic. And this is something that depicts all the potential problems and aggressions we can face with our space activities. And you see that they are in space, but they are also on the surface of the planet, of course. And you see that that's another point of connection, of course, with cyber, is that the cyber threat is in the list of the space threats we have to cover, of course. Like for any activity now, we have to make sure that we are cyber covered in our activities, of course, if we want to secure them. You see that there are a number of them, and we have to take care of everything. Those threats exist, all of them here. They exist. The only one that doesn't really exist right now, but probably will appear soon, is the directed energy weapon in space. Because right now, those weapons are a bit bulky and a bit difficult to put in space. But they will appear very soon, I'm convinced of that. And we have to think about that for the future as well. We are pretty sure that these aggression possibilities will be used at some point. I've been quoted for saying it's not the question is not to know if a space war will happen, but when it will happen. And why I'm certain of the fact that we need to cover those aggression and they will happen sometime is because those space services are essential to our lives. Of course, an adversary, an enemy, will try to disrupt them to gain an advantage on us. In a case of a crisis or a conflict, of course, that's an advantage he will need if you want to win that war or take the upper hand on the crisis. And that's exactly the same for cyber, by the way. The thing we have to do is not necessarily destroying satellites, probably not the more efficient way of doing, even if there are some threats in that regard, of course, but he will try certainly to deny the services and to cut them down. So there are many ways to do that. So now, of course, the question is, how do you discourage such an aggression to happen? The first thing is make sure that all your digital networks are secure. We can't operate in space right now without digital networks, of course. And that's a question I had recently. How can you make sure that you can still operate your satellites if there is a major cyber attack? Well, the answer is clear, I can't. So I have to secure also my networks to make sure that those services are available, and I can bring that advantage to the other domains, of course, Army, Air Force, and Air Force and Navy. Sorry for the Navy. So it's all a matter of making sure that this will not happen. My mission will be accomplished if I discourage, I deter a potential enemy to do that, of course, and to attack our space capabilities. So I have to cover all those circumstances. That's many links that could be attacked through cyber means, of course. So where are we in that now? We are still establishing the Space Command in France. So we are pretty new. We are less than a 5-year-old. Still in a growing process. Establishing in Toulouse. Probably know that Toulouse is probably the heart of space activities in France and probably in Europe as well. But we have many things to do. It was not considered. We were operating space capabilities before the Space Command was created, of course. But it was not necessarily in a way that allowed space operations to be included in general military operations. It was just really a support. The satellites we are using were operated in a way that didn't take into account any kind of aggression in space. And now we have to do it differently. Of course, operating those capabilities through a conflict needs to be synchronized with other actions and operations in the other domains, including the cyber domain, of course. That's where we need to establish first, well, to consolidate our capabilities through the satellites themselves, the ground segments, and all the links between them, plus what connects the space capabilities to other capabilities or to information systems in general. We have to make sure that we understand what happens in space. That's why you've got this picture of a radar. This is a French radar. We're pretty proud of it. It's very unique in the world, I think. Very capable. Getting a bit old, we need to replace it and make sure that we secure our surveillance capabilities for the future. Not that it's enough to cover whole space, of course. We are covering only a small bubble over France. But that's the next step also, is make sure we can operate in conjunction with partners wherever they are. They could be in the civilian commercial sector, but also abroad And my job is also to establish connections and make sure that my operations are compatible and coordinated, if not synchronized, with what the others are doing in space, of course. If I do something and nobody's aware of it, I become a danger for everybody, and that could be interpreted as a threat. Again, attribution is a problem. Our main lines of action, of course, is modernizing our capabilities. They are, remote sensing, communications, PNT. We are doing that with Galileo now, plus the GPS, of course. Developing our capabilities through our national programs, but also the European programs. And the EU is doing a lot, making sure that we can coordinate and prepare with NATO for major engagement, military engagement in Europe to protect and defend Europe. That's lots of lines of action, of course. And my main concern right now is make sure that I can coordinate and control everything. So making sure that I can see what's happening in space, read what's happening in space, understand what's happening in space, and react accordingly, whether it's with my own capabilities or with others, or in conjunction with others' capabilities. And with that, everybody can contribute. And when I'm doing that for my own operations and military operations, of course, I make it secure for all and every one of us. A danger in space is not only for me. An aggression in space can be directed to a commercial satellite as well as towards a military satellite. And I refer, of course, to the recent declaration coming from Mr. Putin about commercial satellites as a legitimate target in times of a crisis or war. So we are all in the same boat here, of course. The military use a lot of commercial capabilities, by the way. That's why Mr. Putin said what he said. And I think solidarity in terms of protection and defense of our capabilities in space, just like in the cyber domain, is essential. And that's the reason why you see on those four vignettes of this slide, you see lots of people. Because that's work also with human beings. There's a lot of automation, of course, artificial intelligence, you name it. But at the end, I need operators well-trained that can read the signs. The machines will do a lot, but they will not do everything. And they certainly, and especially not in the beginning, make decisions for the military commander. So we have to train for that and make sure that we can also face any kind of degraded situation until the point where we lost our digital networks completely, and we are completely unable to communicate with our satellites or with the others, of course. And that's where I will do another war, but certainly not this one. So cybersecurity is at the heart of our consideration, because the first thing we don't want to lose is our networks, of course, and IT systems. So we need really to rely on that. We need to make sure that it's properly connected to all the data providers we are using, whether it's purely intelligence, but also just open source data. Connected with my foreign partners. You can see some foreign uniforms on the slides, but also with civilian partners. And you can see here CNES appearing, of course, as our agency and our expertise source for our activities. The main thing is in that, of course, on the cyber protection is securing the networks, of course, but securing also the data. We don't want the data we use to be corrupted. It's very important to make sure that the decisions will be based on sound data, and that's, of course, a big challenge, making sure that what is provided by another source, which is not necessarily national, is not corrupted on the transmission link, of course. So that ends my remark. I think we have a little bit of time for taking a couple of questions. I'm again very happy to be here, and I hope I convinced you that it's all a team game and we are all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Major General. I invite you to take a seat. I can take the microphone near me. Please do not hesitate to raise questions. I was about to ask mine, but I see that Guillaume Texier has one. Thank you, Guillaume. Guillaume asks, is French CDE running routine crisis management exercises joint with civilian bodies, such as space agencies, non-military international organizations, private company like critical providers, etc.? You can see the question here.
The answer is yes. Routine is not really training. We are doing real operations every day. So in real operations, every day, we have to face abnormal situations. And we are, of course, coordinating with all the civilian agencies and external operators, plus foreign operators. And the best example is that we are following, for example, hazardous re-entries. So, big chunk of metals falling down from space. There is an interesting series this week. We had 6 or 7 alerts, I think. So 3 of them or 4 of them are now down. They fell in the Pacific Ocean, no worries. But we have to follow that, and of course, and make sure that there is an alert. The other part of the answer is, of course, we have a major exercise, an annual exercise called Astérix. It's run in Toulouse, and we bring everybody together. So it was in March. It's usually in March. It was the fourth session, fourth Astérix exercise in 24. And there we bring all together the other services, foreign partners, and civilian operators as well. And we operate all together in simulated scenarios on a simulated network, but training to react to any kind of situation that could happen during a major crisis.
Thank you. Alessandra De Angelis asks, are there criteria you follow to identify critical entities in protecting the core space infrastructure? How do you manage to protect critical space infrastructure you do not own, manage, or operate?
On the first part of the question, it's secret. I can't talk about it, of course. No, well, it's where we have to put some human mind in the loop, of course, and we have to identify that and to set up priorities. It's not an easy game, and vulnerabilities are everywhere. You can't cover everything. You have also to assess the amount of risk that you will have to manage. And of course, if you identify vulnerabilities and you are trying to correct them, it takes some time. So by the time they are corrected, of course, you live with those vulnerabilities. But my job is also to make sure that even with those vulnerabilities, I'm still ready to operate. And now, how do I protect what I do not own? Well, it's already pretty difficult with what I own, I can tell you. And the rest is really keeping that conversation going with other operators and identifying the ways they have to protect themselves, of course. And the first thing is they have to be aware of the situation. So danger in space and the fact that we all operate together, that what you do has an impact on what the others are doing, of course. What I can do to support you, I expect you can reciprocate at some point, is the way we are doing it right now. Make sure that we are protecting against the general threats. My mission is to protect the French interests, and not only military, of course. Those interests are everywhere in our economic world, of course. So my mission is also to protect the commercial activities in space.
Thank you. We have a very dynamic audience. Thank you. Gert Willemus asks, how do you see the usage of public clouds like AWS for European missions?
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer, but we asked ourselves that question, but we don't have the answer. I think we have to find a way to use those clouds without creating any new vulnerability. And that's the real trick. Now, most of what we exchange about space situation is coming from commercial sensors, by the way, or just open sources. So the main flow of our data is on unclassified networks. So the trick is more, I think, it's just a personal opinion at this stage, there's no decision behind it, to connect this type of cloud with our own networks that will be probably more protected and will host different types of information, making sure that there is no well, the interaction is only positive between the two networks, of course. So that can be done by making sure that the information flow is unidirectional, for example. I don't think it works very much. And the other thing is how to use this type of cloud, of course, to facilitate the exchanges with other partners, whether they are commercial or foreign.
Another question from Cesar Carmona Tapia. The US Space Systems Command has developed the IA pre-program enabling commercial operators to deliver services, comms, intelligence to the DoD for national security. Does the French Space Command have something similar? Would IA pre be an acceptable compliance framework?
On the last part of the question, frankly, I don't know. Now, how does artificial intelligence plays in what we are trying to do? Well, it's everywhere, just like it's everywhere in the development of new digital systems. So, well, speaking about artificial intelligence is really resorting to what I call usually buzzwords. You have to understand what's behind. But yes, it will be everywhere. What I expect from artificial intelligence is that it will be everywhere. It will help the operators to do their job more efficiently and quicker. The operational advantage that we will have on our competitors will be probably measured in reducing and how we can reduce the decision time. So how can you make a good decision? So analyze all the data that is available. Don't make any mistake in those analysis, and then make a decision very quickly. And there you can see where the artificial intelligence will play a role. Of course, it will be everywhere in the chain of command. It will be also used to facilitate flying the satellites, maneuvering the satellites in flight, especially in very close maneuvers, if you have proximity operations, for example. So it will help a lot. It will help sending the proper orders from your decision to the satellite. Of course, you decide that you need to do something with your satellite, and all the new systems and automated system, of course, will translate that in something that is understandable by the satellite. On the other hand, it's true as well. You can have also some processing in space, in satellites, that could help us again speed up all the processes, making the decisions easier to make, identifying the proper information for the operators, etc., etc. Now, on the compliance framework, I don't know. We're not there yet.
This echoes another question from François-Marie Le Saffre. How do you work with the new AI center of the MINARM? How AI is considered as a room for protection or else?
AI will help the defense in general, of course, as I just said. Now, again, artificial intelligence to me is just a tool. So I expect that they will develop useful tools and I can make it to good use in my own systems. But right now, it's just a sort of a provider-customer type of relationship. I'm just waiting for them to provide me or to suggest me some good things. But I expect a lot from them, of course.
There is a question from Raphaël Bastien that makes a perfect transition to what will happen tomorrow. It's related to quantum and post-quantum cryptography. He says, some countries are developing expertise in quantum communications and post-quantum cryptography. How do you see the progress of quantum technologies for satellite security? Does the CDE believe that these technologies could revolutionize satellite security?
Well, you see, you can say it's a revolution after it happened, of course. So we'll see if it's a revolution or not. What do we expect from quantum technology, of course, is make those automatic systems more efficient in the future, treating things quicker and probably vaster amounts of data in a more efficient way. On cryptography, of course, we expect a lot. The weak points or the weak links in our satellite systems are very often between the satellites and the ground segment. So that's what we need to secure at first, and after the cryptography will also secure your ground systems, of course. But the first thing we will try to avoid using quantum technology is making sure that nobody can hack our communication systems. And the first one will be with the satellites, of course.
Mm-hmm. We have a few seconds left, not even minutes, so I will try to link two questions that are related to the approach taken by the CDE. First one is from Ilias Tsitsios. He says, is there any taxonomy under legal considerations a commander should take into consideration before taking action in space? And on another topic, but related to the approach, what is the approach of the CDE when working with commercial players? Certification, audits? That's the question from Mathieu Bailly.
With the seconds we've got left, yes, very quick answer. It's all a matter of trust for the relationship between partners, whether they are civilians, commercial, foreign, whatever. The trust, we need to build some trust between us, of course, and we have to rely on each other, just like in a team. And the first part of the question was about
the taxonomy and the legal consideration.
Legal considerations. Yes, we need to develop that. Of course, we are active in international discussions on what is a normal or an abnormal behavior and what is legitimate or not to do in space. And so we are engaged in the discussion. Right now, we are operating under the general armed conflict laws, of course, and the general principles of those laws are valid for us. And the major reaction guidance I have is self-defense, of course. If I have to defend myself, I will. If I have to defend some French or foreign assets, I will.
Beware. Thank you very much, Major General. We can give you a warm round of applause.